So today we're having an early access look at this game, Palworld, the new open world survival and crafting game from Pocket Pair. In this game you collect creatures known as pals and you can use them to craft, build and battle as you progress through the game. It is playable as single player, multiplayer and it will have dedicated servers. So you might be asking yourself, what is Palworld even about? Well, in my opinion, Palworld is what you would get if Pokemon and Ark Survival Ascended had a baby, with a little sprinkle of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Palworld has a lot of interesting features which we are going to delve into, and I want to give a massive thanks to Pocket Pair for allowing me early access to their game. I'm also going to be giving away some keys for Palworld, so make sure you're subscribed and stay tuned till the end of the video on information on how you can win a key. I'll be picking winners from the comments section before the game launches. These are the minimum specs for Palworld. It's also worth noting that this game will be releasing on Xbox Game Pass, however, I'm not 100% sure if crossplay is going to be available on launch. So let's start things off with the gameplay. Now I have to say, for an early access game, Palworld runs buttery smooth. I've never experienced an early access game to run as smooth as Palworld. It's very well optimised. In typical survival sandbox game fashion, you start out by picking up materials and resources off the ground, as well as punching trees and yoinking items out of bushes, and you'll notice a tutorial box at the top right of your screen. So this will guide you all the way until your first gym boss battle. Now this is a really good tutorial, especially if you're new to the game, without holding your hand too much, because that's one thing I dislike about games. So once you have enough materials, you can build your crafting bench to make your first set of tools for mining and chopping trees, which you can then use to get even more resources and start building your first base. You can also craft pal spheres, which are what you use to capture pals, and as you progress through the game you unlock higher quality pal spheres which increase the chances of successfully capturing pals. It's also worth noting that the higher level pals require better spheres for capturing, as using the starter spheres sometimes yield a 1% chance to capture, so you'll just end up wasting them. So once you've got some spheres, get out there and start capturing some pals. And as you can already imagine, the lower the HP of a pal, the higher chance of capturing them, so give them a good whack before throwing a sphere in their face. The base building is good in Palworld, but there are a few things that I don't like, but I'll touch on that later. You build your starter base, which can be upgraded later on, and then you need to build all your usuals like your crafting benches, food resources, somewhere to sleep, you know the drill. In my upcoming videos I'll be showing you some good base designs as well as how to set up auto farm bases to give yourselves the best start. I've also found some really good locations for setting up your bases, so you can have multiple bases. Currently I've got 3. I believe that this number does increase when you upgrade your power box. Now I'll show you some good locations which are in some rich resource areas, and your power box also acts as a fast travel point, which is really good, so travelling base to base is easy and it makes having auto farms for your bases essential. And as you'd expect, there is a progress system in place when it comes to base building via the PAL box, which will give you tasks to complete in order to level up your base and further unlock more items. Currently there is a max of 15 PALs per base, and I'm unsure of the base limit cap due to not being at endgame just yet, but the more you level up the PAL box, the more bases you get to build. So overall there is a lot of choice when it comes to the infrastructure of your base, and as your base progresses so will the demands required to operate it, so you'll need to go out and hunt better pals to work in your base. There's even shiny pals which are bigger and better versions of their counterparts. These are, however, extremely rare. I've only seen 3 of them and I've played this game close to 30 hours so far. Now I mentioned pals working in your base, which is an interesting feature. Now these little guys will help build your base, and you can also put them to work depending on their skill set. Some pals can water crops, some can plant seeds and harvest, whilst others can mine and also chop wood. Some will even help you build stuff within your base. It makes running your base a lot easier when having an efficient pal team doing the work for you. You manage this through your pal box at your base, and you can even lift them up and chuck them where you want them to work. Now obviously this all depends on their skill set and what they can do. And you can even set up assembly lines, it's great. Now you will be raided, and it happens often. When you're at your base you'll be raided. It doesn't happen every day, but I've experienced the raid every 3 to 4 in-game days, so it's often enough. Sometimes it's wild pals, other times it can be human NPC factions, which there are a few. Now your pals will defend your base, but you'll want to assist if your pals are low level, otherwise you'll be railed into next week. There are quite a few things to do in this game, such as dungeons. You have dungeons, world bosses, boss dungeons, boss events and gym battles. Now I haven't progressed far enough to experience all of what Palworld has to offer, but I've done my fair share of dungeon runs, boss events and gym battles. And I'll tell you now, they get difficult. If you go into any of this content underleveled, undergeared or overall underprepared, you'll get lit up like the 4th of July. You need to make sure that you have decent gear, weapons and that your PAL team is at a good enough level to compete. Now your PAL party consists of 5. I don't know if 5 is the cap because I haven't progressed that far into the game yet. So make sure your party is decent and at a high enough level. Now PALs have strengths and weaknesses, so fire beats grass, grass beats water, you know, the standard element system. So I always try and have a different type of PAL in my party when I take on this content. The dungeons are big and the scenery and layout changes with each dungeon. They randomly spawn and despawn around the world, and they have a time limit until they disappear. Now the goal of the dungeon is to defeat or capture the final boss, and you'll be awarded loot and chests at the end by the teleporter. Dungeons are great fun, and some PALs can only be captured inside specific dungeons, as they do not roam the wild on the outside. So they're always worth doing when you come across one. Boss events and gym battles are a lot different. Boss events have a certain time limit, and once completed they go on cooldown for a number of hours before you can do them again, but they're worth doing on every cooldown just to capture the boss, because these PALs have great stats. Now gym battles you'll do as you progress through the game, and they get really hard. So as mentioned earlier, the tutorial will lead you up to your first gym boss battle, and you can find these bosses located in towers scattered across the map. Once you beat the boss, you'll be teleported to the top and it will have a fast travel point that you can now access. Now don't be fooled by some of these PALs, they may look cute, but even the first boss can two-shot you if you get caught out of position. This guy looks like a cross between Totoro and Electabuzz, but like I said, he may look cool and cute, but he'll two-shot you and give you a wallop straight back into next week. Your PAL should normally be able to keep the boss's aggro, but if you get too close or out of position, you're going to get the smoke. But overall, these boss fights are fun, and they're a good test of how strong your PAL team is. Be sure to utilise the surroundings and the environment to your advantage during these fights. Now you get some ancient technology points for beating these bosses, so be sure to keep an eye out on the map for them, as these points can go towards unlocking ancient technology for your base, which will really help with your base progress. As mentioned earlier, you'll come across human NPC factions, and they have camps around the world. You can find them by looking for the rising smoke coming from their cooking pot. Now once you defeat them, you'll find a caged PAL in the middle of the camp. Once you release the PAL, it will go straight to your PAL box back at your base, so it's a good way of getting PALs. The graphics and the visuals of this game are beautiful. I really like the art style of Palworld, and it feels very similar to Fortnite's art style, which is not a bad thing. I'm also a massive fan of Ark Survival Evolved and Ascended, and this game has a lot of features that are very similar to Ark, which makes me like the game a lot more. Now a lot of people have said that this is a Pokemon knockoff. Now possibly an unpopular opinion here, but Palworld versions look better. So if you like survival games and you're a fan of Ark and Pokemon, then this game will have you covered, and it offers a lot of replayability and game features to keep you coming back to the game daily. The character creation is decent, and it gives you enough options to make unique looking avatars, and you can customise everything from body size to hair colour and unique facial features, like pure white eyes if you want to look like Zeus. When levelling in Palworld, you'll acquire technology points, which you can spend to unlock items for your base, as well as weapons and tools that you and your pals can use. You'll eventually be able to unlock all the guns and fun weapons towards the bottom of the tech tree. One of my favourite items is the grappling gun. This item is a lifesaver. Now you unlock this tool with ancient technology points, which as discussed you get from defeating gym boss battles and boss events. You can have missile launchers for your pals, it's nuts. Including guns, you get like a gun for Tansy, which is a little monkey, and he sits on your shoulder and he just starts popping shots of his assault rifle. So as well as unlocking things, you'll also be able to upgrade the stats of your character, such as stamina, health and carry weight, just like in most survival games. So there are a few boxes that say unknown item and they've just got a big question mark. You unlock these by capturing pals in the world, so they'll only unlock once you capture specific pals. Sometimes it could be a saddle, sometimes it's a piece of equipment for the pal, such as being able to equip them with a gun. It all depends. Like I said, I haven't progressed that far into the game, but there is a lot to unlock. One feature I really like is the pal deck. The PAL deck shows you which pals you've captured and seen in the wild, and it also shows you what item drops you can get from them if you need them to farm certain materials. It also shows you their habitat, so you know where to go hunting during the day and night. It's worth mentioning that some pals only come out at night, so make sure you bring a torch. You can also see their work suitability, and it will show you what they'll do when they're working in your base. For example, pals with kindling will light your fires, cook your food and smelt your ore, so make sure your base has a diverse bunch of pals. Some pals, like the world bosses you capture such as Pen King, have multiple work suitability traits, making him very useful in your base. I'll be showing you some really good farming base setups in future videos, as well as the best pal setups, so be sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more Palworld content. Lastly, I want to talk about a few negatives that I have with the game. There are only a few negatives that I have, and one of which is the base building. There doesn't seem to be any corner or angled base parts, which doesn't leave much room in the creative department when it comes to building unique looking bases. At the moment it all feels a bit too square, but hopefully this is something that will be added in a future update and there'll be more base parts and more things to build with. And lastly is the flying speed. Now you can unlock saddles to ride certain pals quite early on, and flying's great because it gives you access to certain areas on the map. However, flying speed doesn't feel much faster than ground sprinting speed, which is a bit disappointing as I was expecting flying to be quite significant. Now I'm not talking about Mach 5 speeds here, you know, nothing too crazy. But it needs to be at least double the current speed because your flying stamina runs out relatively fast, yet you barely move. But overall, Palworld is great and it plays really well, and it has been buttery smooth for me, which is a surprise because most early access games that I've played don't normally have this sort of stability. And as usual, there are a few visual and audio bugs, but they're so minor that they're not even worth mentioning. Now I really like Palworld and it has a lot to offer. The map is huge. I've explored about half of it and I feel like I've barely scratched the surface. So if you're interested in Palworld, be sure to wishlist it on Steam. I'll leave a link down below. And if you want to be in for a chance to win a key to this game, be sure to like and share this video and leave a comment on what you like about Palworld. Make sure you're also subscribed to the channel and I'll pick the winners from the comment section before the game launches, which is slated as the 19th of January. Now this date could change, but you'll get your game key on launch, so don't worry. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.